It's official. Facebook have declared itself to be an explicitly anti-white company. Not that we didn't already know this, but now there is absolutely no doubt. The announcement came in response to the Christchurch incident, because what spells love and tolerance like banning political opinions based on race? Facebook's statement is what one would expect from a company that takes 1984 as an instruction manual and not a warning. And I quote, "Today, we are announcing a ban on praise, support, and representation of white nationalism and separatism on Facebook and Instagram, which we'll start enforcing next week." It's clear that these concepts are deeply linked to organised hate groups and have no place on our services. Our policies have long prohibited hateful treatment of people based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, or religion, and that has always included white supremacy. We didn't originally apply the same rationale to expressions of white nationalism and separatism because we were thinking about broader concepts of nationalism and separatism. Things like American pride and Basque separatism, which are an important part of people's identity. But over the past 3 months, our conversations with members of civil society and academics who are experts in race relations around the world have confirmed that white nationalism and separatism cannot be meaningfully separated from white supremacy and organised hate groups. Our own review of hate figures and organisations, as defined by our Dangerous Individuals and Organisation policy, further revealed the overlap between white nationalism and separatism and white supremacy. Going forward, while people will still be able to demonstrate pride in their ethnic heritage, we will not tolerate praise or support for white nationalism and separatism." End quote. Take note of the reference to the Dangerous Individuals and Organisations policy, as we will talk about this later in the video. Motherboard originally broke the story and reported the following, and I quote, "Phrases such as 'I am a proud white nationalist' and 'immigration is tearing this country apart, white separatism is the only answer' will now be banned, according to the company. Implicit and coded white nationalism and white separatism will not be banned immediately, in part because the company said it's harder to detect and remove." End quote. So expressing the legitimate and common opinion that you are against immigration will now be against the rules, but only for white people. The majority of Australians don't want more immigration. Are the majority of Australians now not allowed to express their views? Facebook mentioned that it will be okay to demonstrate pride in one's ethnic heritage, but remember, these are the same people who think saying it's okay to be white is white supremacy. As for banning white separatism, that means they've banned whites discussing ideas to move and set up their own independent territories. In essence, they've banned discussing and supporting white flight and self-determination for whites. Worse, they've essentially banned white South Africans from discussing West Cape secession, likely the only possible peaceful way to stop white South African genocide. It would be hard for Facebook to be even more evil if they tried. Facebook claim they spoke to what they deem, quote, members of civil society and experts in race relations, end quote, and that they, quote, confirmed that white nationalism and separatism cannot be meaningfully separated from white supremacy, end quote. What experts say that, you might ask? Did they actually talk to nationalists of a European background? What evidence do they have to support this hypothesis? Here is the definition of white supremacy: a person who believes that the white race is inherently superior to other races and that they should have control over all other races. Here is the definition of nationalism: loyalty and devotion to a nation, especially a sense of national consciousness, exalting one nation above all others, and placing primary emphasis on promotion of its cultural interests and opposed to those of other nations or supranational groups. To be a nationalist does not mean that you believe you are superior to other races or nationalities. That includes white ethnic nationalism. It simply means you place an emphasis on your own nation and people over others. It does not mean you hate the other. It means you love your own. Claiming that white nationalism is equivalent to white supremacy is factually incorrect. It is also extremely offensive and dehumanizing. Facebook claim to be taking a stand against racial hatred, yet they now have a policy of explicit racial hatred. It goes without saying that this rule will only apply to whites, and it will not apply to any other ethnic or religious group, no matter what they do. It also goes without saying that Facebook will still allow the worst kinds of hatred, so long as it comes from the left. Their announcement came no less than a day after this news, as reported by Patriot activist Neil Erickson.
Today we have banned Neil Erickson, Tom Sewell, the Lad Society, the United Patriots Front, and the Anti-Pedium Resistance from Facebook. Anti-Pedium Resistance was never on Facebook, and I don't even really know how to pronounce their name. This is how much we're connected. And Instagram for violating our dangerous individuals and organisation policy. Dangerous individuals. They will no longer be allowed a presence on our services, and we will also remove praise, support and representation of these individuals and groups when we become aware of it. They're going to ban people who praise me. You know, I was looking forward to a bunch of people praising me, but it's not going to happen now. Nationalist Uprising, which was my main page, has been removed from the platform due to its representation of myself, yours truly, Neil Erickson. We don't want people or organisations who spread hate to find a platform on our services, and this end part is totally scary. And we will continue to review and assess those who engage in this kind of offline behaviour. Now we've got a vetting process for a social media platform. Your offline behaviour will resonate into you being able to be on a social media platform.
Notice again the reference to dangerous individuals and organisations. This is Facebook's exact policy, and I quote, "In an effort to prevent and disrupt real-world harm, we do not allow any organisations or individuals that proclaim a violent mission or are engaged in violence from having a presence on Facebook. This includes organisations or individuals involved in the following: terrorist activity, organised hate, mass or serial murder, human trafficking, organised violence or criminal activity. We also remove content that expresses support or praise for groups, leaders or individuals involved in these activities." End quote. In other words, Facebook have just compared groups like Lad Society to terrorists and human traffickers. Anyone who has watched my interview with the leader of Lad Society, Tom Sewell, knows this is a defamatory and false accusation. Lads is a peaceful community group for young men of European ancestry to connect with other men and grow as individuals. Never has it even once endorsed anything other than acting as a peaceful member of the community, nor have they ever made any statement or policy that comes even close to what any reasonable person could deem hateful. Members are encouraged to be productive and positive members of the community at all times, and they expel troublemakers. In fact, following the Christchurch incident, Lads made this official statement on their now removed Facebook page, and I quote, "Politically motivated violence is not in the interests of our organisation or our community. Our mission is to create a community organisation of European descended Australians who identify as such in order to preserve and grow our culture and legacy on this land. Our current objectives include running programs and services that bring benefits to what we define as our community, such as, but not limited to, job networking, physical health, mental health, skills education seminars, mentoring, and community assistance. Our future objectives include, but are not limited to, child and family services, education, business, commercial and residential property, food supply, industry, and more. It is our belief that the corporate media out of convenience and greed, the intelligence agencies out of laziness, the academics out of ignorance, and the policymakers in government out of pragmatism and short-term policy mindset have an agenda to associate our organisation and organisations similar to ours with politically motivated violence for the purpose of prescribing us, pushing new anti-association laws, and therefore using our purging as a scapegoat to ensure a perceived successful response to present to the public a false sense of resolution and therefore safety, and that the government and its corporate and bureaucratic agencies have done their job, which they have not. End quote. On what grounds does Facebook claim Lad Society violated their dangerous peoples and organisations policy? Do they have any specific posts? Do they have any specific actions? Any statements from leadership? Do they have any evidence at all? Or are they making this defamatory claim based on fake news media statements? Whatever the cause, it is clear that Facebook and the ruling class are desperate to shut down the rising white racial consciousness. Equating white ethnic nationalism to terrorism and white supremacy is just the latest attempt by them to shut down debate. The catch cry of racist no longer works, so they are going to resort to ever more draconian and iron-fisted censorship. The establishment assume that people are stupid and won't notice the inconsistency and blatant hypocrisy. Love of oneself does not equal hatred of the other. Quite the contrary, in fact. Without love of ourselves, we cannot truly love anyone else. Coincidentally, Facebook announced its new anti-white policy on the same day Senator Fraser Anning produced an open letter to Scott Morrison. There will be a link in the description to the full letter, but for the purposes of this video, we will focus on just one part, and I quote, "Censorship of the media was hardly mentioned after terror attacks on Australian soil. Now, however, after an attack by an opponent of multiculturalism, the state is demanding censorship of the internet. Any website which does not embrace your extreme multicultural agenda is coming under scrutiny. This foreshadows darkness and tyranny, which were once unimaginable to Australians. You and your cohorts are driving us there at full speed. Australia is on the path to a police state, fomented and legitimised by multiculturalist ideology. Again, Mr. Morrison, your government leads the charge by allowing people to be persecuted under ill-defined accusations of hate speech when most just hate oppression. I implore all politicians to step back and think again about what you are doing to this nation. Do not oppress us in a knee-jerk reaction to this tragedy born of fanaticism. Any response must be measured and sane. It must not be at the price of this nation's cohesion and unity. Free speech is always the first target of ham-fisted tyranny. The Christchurch killer's intent was to topple our traditions by his evil scheme. Do not become pawns in his game." End quote. Indeed, one of the goals of Brenton Tarrant was to cause this exact reaction by the establishment. Worse, it is a fact that censorship, ostracism, and isolation actually makes the likelihood of further violence even higher. The way to reduce the chance of physical conflict is to talk openly about issues and listen to grievances. At a time when we desperately need free speech, the ruling class are giving us the exact opposite. We also can't look over the fact that in Australia it is unlawful for a person to do any act involving a distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on race, colour, descent, or national or ethnic origin. Given Facebook's policy only applies to whites, It quite clearly violates Australian racial discrimination law. It may well be worth making a complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission. At the very least, if they fail to act, it will be rock solid evidence that they are also anti-white. That said, now is not the time to give up hope. The establishment may be doing what it can to foster further conflict and division, but that does not mean we have to give it to them. We must refuse to react violently in the face of growing oppression. We need to show the world that we are indeed peaceful, and that despite their endless attacks against us, that we will continue on message without shame. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And we shall win, because you cannot censor the internet and you cannot keep a good man down. I hope you enjoyed the video. Share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.
Do you believe that the so-called White Australia policy will always be a stumbling block?
I don't think it's such a stumbling block as people pretend, but that it's important for us, I haven't the slightest doubt.
That we should maintain it the way it is?
So long as we possibly can, we ought to aim at having a homogeneous population. I don't want to see reproduced in Australia the kind of problem they have in South Africa, or in America, or increasingly in Great Britain. I think it's been a very good policy, and it's been of great value to us.